Our book club president poured the tea at exactly 7 p.m. every Thursday for 12 years. But on October 15th, when Eleanor took her first sip and collapsed on the library floor, I noticed something no one else did. The teacup was meant for me. I'm 59 years old, I've read every Agatha Christie novel twice, and I was about to solve a real murder. My name is Helen Whitmore, and I never imagined that my obsession with detective novels would prepare me for anything beyond spirited discussions about red herrings and unreliable narrators. But that Thursday evening changed everything. The Riverside Literary Society had been meeting every Thursday at 7 p.m. for the past 12 years at the old Carnegie Library on Maple Street. There were 8 of us, all women, all between the ages of 54 and 73. We'd survived divorces, widowhood, empty nests, and retirement together. We'd read everything from classic literature to contemporary thrillers, but my favorite months were always when we returned to Agatha Christie. Our president, Vivian Ashford, was a woman of precise habits. She arrived at exactly 6:45 p.m. every Thursday, unlocked the small meeting room on the second floor, and arranged the chairs in a perfect circle. At 6:55 p.m., she would begin preparing tea using the antique tea set her mother had left her, delicate porcelain cups with hand-painted forget-me-nots around the rim. Each cup had a small distinguishing mark on the bottom, nothing obvious, just tiny variations in the pattern that Vivian had pointed out to us years ago. "So we each have our special cup," she'd said with that controlled smile of hers. Mine had a small chip on the handle, barely visible. I'd been using that same cup for 12 years. October 15th started like any other Thursday. I arrived at 6:50 p.m., carrying my worn copy of Murder on the Orient Express, which we were rereading for what must have been the 4th time. Eleanor Hartley was already there, sitting in her usual seat by the window. She was 73, the oldest among us, and the wealthiest by far. Eleanor had made her fortune in real estate development and had never quite let anyone forget it. She wore expensive clothes with casual elegance, donated generously to the library, and had a way of dominating conversations without raising her voice. She wasn't unkind exactly, just accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Helen," she greeted me with a nod, not looking up from her phone. "I'm glad you're early. I wanted to talk to you about something." Before she could continue, the others began arriving. Margaret Chen at 6:52 p.m., precise as always. Diane Rousseau at 6:54 p.m., breathless and apologetic about traffic. Sharon Blake at 6:56 p.m., already pulling out her color-coded notes. Patricia Morse at 6:58 p.m., carrying homemade lemon cookies as she did every week. And finally, Vivian at exactly 6:59 p.m., even though she'd been there since 6:45 p.m. setting up. At 7 p.m. exactly, Vivian called us to order. "Ladies, shall we begin?" She moved to the small table where the tea service sat, beginning her ritual. First, she filled the teapot with hot water from the electric kettle. Then she arranged the cups on the tray, each one placed just so. I watched her hands, elegant and steady, performing the same motions she'd performed hundreds of times before. But something was different that night. I noticed it immediately, though I didn't understand its significance yet. Vivian picked up my cup, the one with the small chip on the handle, and placed it in front of Eleanor's usual seat. My cup had never gone to Eleanor before. Never. We each had our designated cups, our assigned seats. It was part of Vivian's obsessive order. I almost said something, but Eleanor spoke first. "Actually, Vivian, I think you've mixed up the cups. This is Helen's, isn't it?" Vivian glanced at the cup, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise? Confusion? It was gone so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Oh, you're right," Vivian said smoothly. "How careless of me." She switched the cups, placing mine in front of my seat and giving Eleanor her usual one, the one with a tiny gold rim. The meeting proceeded normally. We discussed Poirot's methodology, debated whether the ending was Christie's finest work, and ate Patricia's lemon cookies. Eleanor was more animated than usual, talking about a trip she was planning to Belgium to visit the actual Orient Express route. "I've decided to treat myself," she announced. "First class all the way." I'm not getting any younger, and I've worked hard enough to enjoy it. Sharon asked about the cost, and Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. Money isn't an object anymore. I've made some changes recently, simplified things. Life's too short not to enjoy it. At 7:47 p.m., Vivian poured the tea. She handed each of us our cups, moving around the circle with her characteristic precision. When everyone had been served, she raised her own cup. To another lovely evening of literary discussion, she said. We all raised our cups. I was about to take a sip when Eleanor gasped. The sound was sharp, startled. Her cup clattered onto the saucer, tea splashing across her lap. Her hand went to her throat, her eyes wide and shocked. Eleanor. Patricia was closest to her. Are you all right? Eleanor tried to speak, but no words came out. Her lips were moving, but only a strange choking sound emerged. Her face began to flush, then started turning an alarming shade of blue-gray. Call 911. Diane was already pulling out her phone. Eleanor collapsed forward, her body hitting the table, scattering papers and cups. The crash of breaking porcelain seemed impossibly loud in the sudden chaos. Vivian rushed to Eleanor's side. Eleanor, can you hear me? I stood frozen, my untouched cup of tea still in my hand, watching the scene unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Something was wrong. Something beyond the obvious medical emergency happening in front of me. Margaret, who had nursing experience, was checking Eleanor's pulse, tilting her head back, trying to open her airway. She's not breathing properly. Her pulse is erratic. The ambulance arrived at 7:52 p.m. The paramedics worked quickly, efficiently, but I could see it in their faces. They knew. Eleanor Hartley was pronounced dead at 8:14 p.m. at Riverside General Hospital. The initial assessment was cardiac arrest, not unusual for a woman of her age. But I kept thinking about that teacup. The police arrived at 8:30 p.m. to take statements, standard procedure for any unexpected death. A young officer named Martinez asked us routine questions. When did we notice she was in distress? Had she mentioned feeling unwell? Did she have any known health conditions? We answered as best we could, all of us shaken. Vivian was particularly distraught, or appeared to be. She kept apologizing, as if somehow Eleanor's death was a failure of hosting etiquette. The officer collected Eleanor's teacup, what remained of it, placing it carefully in an evidence bag. Just routine, he assured us. In cases of sudden death, we like to rule out any environmental factors. After they left, we sat in stunned silence. Finally, at 9:15 p.m., Vivian suggested we all go home, that we'd reconvene next week to discuss whether to continue the book club or take a break out of respect for Eleanor. As I drove home that night, my mind kept returning to the same moment. Vivian placing my cup in front of Eleanor's seat. Eleanor noticing. Vivian switching them. If Eleanor hadn't said anything, if she'd simply drunk from my cup without noticing the switch, would I be the one in the morgue right now? I didn't sleep that night. At 2:30 a.m., I was sitting in my living room with every Agatha Christie novel I owned spread across my coffee table. If this was murder, and I was increasingly certain it was, then the methodology mattered. Poison was the obvious choice. Christie had used it in dozens of her novels. Subtle, often undetectable initially, and if administered correctly, could mimic natural causes. But why? Why would anyone want Eleanor dead? Or more disturbingly, why would anyone want me dead? At 7 a.m., I called Margaret Chen. Margaret, I need to ask you something about last night. When you were checking on Eleanor, did you notice anything unusual? Any smell? Any symptoms that seemed odd? There was a long pause. Why are you asking, Helen? Please. Just tell me. There was a smell, she said slowly. Very faint. Almost like almonds? Bitter almonds. I thought it was strange because Patricia's cookies were lemon, not almond. My blood ran cold. Bitter almonds. Cyanide. Margaret, don't tell anyone we had this conversation. Not yet. I hung up and immediately called the police station. I asked to speak to Officer Martinez. When he came on the line, I chose my words carefully. Officer, this is Helen Whitmore from the book club. I know this might sound unusual, but I think you should test Eleanor Hartley's tea for poison. Specifically, cyanide. What makes you think? Because I've read enough detective novels to recognize the symptoms. And because that teacup was supposed to be mine. That got his attention. He asked me to come to the station at 11 a.m. At the police station, I explained everything. The switched cups. The precise seating arrangements that had been maintained for 12 years. The fact that Vivian had never, ever made a mistake like that before. Martinez listened, taking notes. Ms. Whitmore, with all due respect, you're saying you think someone tried to poison you, but accidentally poisoned Mrs. Hartley instead. I'm saying it's a possibility that should be investigated. Why would someone want to poison you? I don't know. But I intend to find out. Martinez was young, but he wasn't dismissive. He told me they would indeed test Eleanor's tea for toxins, that the autopsy would provide more answers. He also warned me not to investigate on my own, that if I was right about being a target, I could be putting myself in danger. I thanked him and left. Then I did exactly what he told me not to do. The first thing I needed to understand was Eleanor's life. What had she meant when she said she'd made some changes and simplified things? I started with the library. Eleanor had been a major donor, and the head librarian, Thomas Green, had worked closely with her on fundraising campaigns. I found him in his office at 2:30 p.m. Thomas, I'm doing a small memorial piece about Eleanor for the book club, I lied smoothly. I wanted to include some information about her charitable work. You knew her well, didn't you? Thomas's face clouded. I did. She was very generous over the years. Though recently. He trailed off. Recently. He sighed. She'd changed her mind about a major donation. We were planning a new children's wing, and she'd pledged $2 million. But 2 weeks ago, she called and withdrew the pledge. Said her priorities had shifted. $2 million. That was significant. Did she say what her new priorities were? She mentioned wanting to travel, to enjoy her remaining years. She'd recently lost her sister to cancer, and I think it made her re-evaluate things. I thanked Thomas and left, my mind racing. Eleanor had been pulling back on commitments, redirecting her money. That suggested she might have been revising her will. That evening, I did something that would have made Vivian proud of my organizational skills. I created a chart. On one side, I listed every member of our book club. On the other, I listed potential motives for wanting Eleanor dead. Vivian Ashford, unknown motive, but access and opportunity. She'd prepared the tea. Margaret Chen, no apparent motive. She'd tried to save Eleanor. Diane Russo, Eleanor had mentioned Diane's son was in financial trouble. Had Diane asked Eleanor for help? Been refused? Sharon Blake, no obvious connection to Eleanor beyond the book club. Patricia Morse, always friendly with Eleanor, but Patricia's husband had been in commercial real estate before he died. Any business conflicts with Eleanor? And myself, why would I be a target? At 10 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice said, Mrs. Whitmore. This is Jennifer Hartley, Eleanor's daughter. I'm calling all the book club members. My mother's lawyer has asked me to inform you that you're mentioned in her will. There will be a reading on Monday at 2 p.m. if you'd like to attend. I nearly dropped the phone. I was in Eleanor's will? We'd been friendly, but I'd never imagined she'd leave me anything. Did your mother change her will recently? I asked carefully. Yes, actually. Just 3 days ago. The lawyer said it was quite different from her previous will. Several people who were included before were removed entirely. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, my mind working through possibilities. Eleanor had changed her will 3 days before she died. Someone who had expected to inherit might have been cut out. Someone who had access to our Thursday meetings. Someone who knew the tea ritual, the cup assignments. Someone who had placed my cup in front of Eleanor's seat. If the original target was me, then Eleanor's death was an accident from the killer's perspective. But why kill me? Unless Eleanor's new will included me, and the old will had included someone else who now had been removed. What if the killer knew about the will change? What if they tried to eliminate the new beneficiary before the will could be executed, hoping Eleanor would then revert to the old will or die intestate, giving the killer another chance? It was convoluted, but Christie had built entire novels on less. The will reading on Monday was at the law offices of Patterson and Amp, Associates. All 8 book club members were there, along with Eleanor's daughter Jennifer, her grandson Marcus, and a few other people I didn't recognize. The lawyer, a thin man named Arthur Patterson, read through the preliminaries. Eleanor's estate was valued at approximately $12 million. Her daughter would receive the house and $3 million. Her grandson would receive $1 million in a trust. Then came the surprises. To the Riverside Public Library, I leave nothing, as I have withdrawn my previous pledge due to my disappointment in their recent management decisions. Thomas Green wasn't there, but I imagined how he'd react to that news. To Vivian Ashford, who has been a dear friend and president of our book club for 12 years, I leave nothing. Our friendship ended when I discovered her betrayal. Vivian's face went white. She gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles showing stark against her skin. The lawyer continued. To Helen Whitmore, my fellow Christie enthusiast and the only person who ever told me when I was being insufferable, I leave the sum of $2 million and my complete collection of first edition Agatha Christie novels. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. $2 million. And the answer to why someone might want me dead. After the reading, I waited until everyone else had filed out, then approached Vivian. She was still sitting in her chair, staring at nothing. Vivian, I said quietly, what betrayal was Eleanor talking about? She looked up at me with something like hatred in her eyes. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Eleanor and I had been friends for 40 years, Vivian said, her voice tight. When her sister got sick last year, I helped care for her. I spent months shuttling between hospitals, dealing with doctors, handling insurance nightmares. And when her sister died, Eleanor promised me that she'd remember my loyalty. She showed me a will that left me $3 million. But she changed it. 3 days before she died, she called me. Said she'd been thinking about friendship, about what it really meant. She said true friends don't expect payment for their care, that the fact I'd asked about the will showed my friendship was transactional. She said she was leaving the money to people who'd never asked her for anything. People like you. The pieces were sliding into place, ugly and damning. You tried to poison me, I said. Before the new will could be executed. You thought if I died before Monday, Eleanor might change the will back, or at least you'd have another chance. Vivian stood up slowly. You're insane. You've read too many detective novels, Helen. This is real life, not Agatha Christie. Then explain why you put my cup in front of Eleanor's seat. I made a mistake. I was distracted. You've never made a mistake like that in 12 years. You're obsessively organized. Everything has its place, its order. You wouldn't switch cups unless you meant to. Prove it, Vivian said coldly. She was right. I had suspicion, motive, opportunity, but no proof. Not yet. That night, I called Officer Martinez and told him everything. He listened, and I could hear the shift in his tone. They'd gotten the toxicology results back. Eleanor had indeed died of cyanide poisoning. Ms. Whitmore, he said, we need you to be very careful. If you're right about being the intended target, you could still be in danger. I know. That's why I need your help. We devised a plan. It was risky, something straight out of a Christie novel. A trap for the killer. On Thursday evening, 1 week after Eleanor's death, I sent a message to the book club group chat. I think we should meet tomorrow night to honor Eleanor's memory and discuss the future of our club. My house, 7 p.m. I'll provide refreshments. Everyone agreed to come, including Vivian. I spent Friday preparing meticulously. Officer Martinez and a colleague would be in my garage, listening through a wire I'd be wearing. I set up my dining room exactly like our library meeting room, circular seating, a tea service in the center. And I prepared one special cup, with a small chip on the handle. At 6:45 p.m., Vivian arrived first. Of course she did. "Thank you for organizing this, Helen," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I think we all need closure." The others arrived promptly. At 7 p.m., we were all seated. "I thought tonight," I began, "we might discuss Eleanor's favorite Christie novel, 5 Little Pigs. A story about a murder disguised as suicide, solved years later when someone finally asks the right questions." I watched Vivian's face carefully. "Eleanor left me her Christie collection," I continued. "When I went to collect it yesterday, I found something interesting tucked inside 5 Little Pigs. A letter, addressed to me, written the day before she died." This was a lie. There was no letter. But Vivian didn't know that. Eleanor wrote that she'd begun to suspect someone was trying to poison her. She'd noticed a bitter taste in her tea twice in the past month. She thought she was being paranoid, but she wrote everything down, just in case. She wrote down names, suspicions, even took a sample of the tea that tasted wrong and saved it. Vivian's composed mask was cracking. "Of course, I gave the letter to the police immediately. They're testing that tea sample now." Eleanor was very specific about which Thursday evening it was from, who had served the tea that night. "You're making this up," Vivian said, but her voice shook. "Am I?" "The police have already matched the cyanide used to kill Eleanor to a specific type, one that's used in jewelry cleaning solutions. You make jewelry, don't you, Vivian? In your workshop at home?" The room had gone completely silent. "Eleanor trusted you," I said quietly. "For 40 years, she trusted you. And you killed her because she had the audacity to give her money to someone else. She owed me." Vivian's voice broke. "I gave her everything. I was there every single day when her sister was dying. I held her hand, I cleaned up the mess, I dealt with all of it. And she thanked me by humiliating me, by calling me mercenary. So you decided to kill me instead. Make it look like a tragic accident at book club, then comfort Eleanor in her grief, hope she'd change the will back in your favor. It should have been you." Vivian screamed. "You never asked her for anything, never did anything to earn it. You just read your stupid books and made her laugh, and somehow that was worth $2 million. But you put the poison in the wrong cup," I said. "You gave it to Eleanor by mistake. She switched them. She noticed and she switched them. It was supposed to be you." The words hung in the air, a full confession. Officer Martinez emerged from the garage, his colleague behind him. "Vivian Ashford, you're under arrest for the murder of Eleanor Hartley and the attempted murder of Helen Whitmore." As they read Vivian her rights and led her away, she looked at me one last time. "You should have been the one who died," she whispered. "But I wasn't," I said. "Because Eleanor saved my life, even without knowing it. And because I paid attention, the way Christie taught me to. The devil is in the details, Vivian. You should have read more carefully." After everyone left, after the statements were given and the house was empty again, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, made and tested by my own hands. I thought about Eleanor, about her sharp wit and her unexpected generosity. About how she'd noticed a switched cup and corrected it, never knowing that simple action had saved one life and ended another. The first edition Christie novels arrived the following week, carefully packed and catalogued. Among them was 5 Little Pigs, and tucked inside was an envelope addressed to me in Eleanor's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Helen," it read. "If you're reading this, then something has happened to me. I hope I'm wrong, but I've learned to trust my instincts. I'm changing my will because I've realized that true friendship isn't measured in grand gestures or expected rewards. It's in honest conversations and shared laughter. Thank you for treating me like a person, not a benefactor. Use the money to do something that makes you happy. And if something does happen to me, well, you'll know what to do. You're the smartest detective I know, even if you've never solved a real mystery before. Until we meet again, Eleanor. I read it 3 times, then carefully placed it back inside the book. 2 months later, I used part of Eleanor's gift to establish a scholarship fund for young women interested in criminal justice. I called it the Eleanor Hartley Memorial Detective Fund. And every Thursday evening at 7 p.m., I still read Agatha Christie. But now, I read them with a different appreciation, understanding that sometimes the lessons in those pages aren't just entertainment. Sometimes, they save your life.